The NFL is always evolving. Every era is different and has its own uniqueness to it. Believe it or not, being this pass happy and going for it on every fourth down, even when it makes no sense, didn't always used to happen. But the players of today, mobile QBs like Lamar and Josh Allen, freak defenders like Kyle Hamilton and Nicky Manwari, and just the insane type of athletes we have in the league would not have existed back in the day. They'd be stoned in the streets for the sorcery they produce on a weekly basis. But to get to this insane point in the NFL, we had to end a few archetypes on the way as a burnt offering. Starting with my personal favorite, that's essentially now gone out of the league, in the blocking fullbacks and bruising backs. Earl Campbell, Mike Allstott, Jerome Bettis, Brandon Jacobs, these players were power personified. They didn't juke defenders, they ran through them. At 240 to 260 pounds, they punished defenders between the tackles, wearing them down over 4 quarters until the 4th quarter became a formality. Hand them the ball on 3rd and 2 and you were getting that first down. No scheme required, just mass meeting mass. Behind them were the fullbacks, Lorenzo Neal, Tony Richardson, Max Strong. These guys were lead blockers who created highways through defensive fronts. They'd line up in the I formation, take the fake handoff, and then demolish the first linebacker they saw. The running back would follow through the hole they created, often untouched for 3 to 4 yards before anyone laid a finger on them. The blocking fullback wasn't just a role player, he was essential to the offense identity. Teams built their entire rushing attack around his ability to create movement at the point of attack. He'd kick out defensive ends on power plays, lead up through the hole on ISO schemes, and seal linebackers on counter runs. Without him, the whole system collapsed. With him, you could run the ball 35 times a game and control the clock. But the league moved away from that style completely. Spread formations made the fullback obsolete almost overnight. When you're running 11 personnel with 3 receivers, a tight end, and a running back, there's no room for a fullback. The math just doesn't work. And even when teams did use 21 personnel with 2 backs, they weren't using a traditional fullback. They were using a hybrid H-back who could line up in the backfield, flex out as a wide receiver, or motion into the slot. Defenses got lighter and faster to match the spread offense, so offenses countered with speed instead of power. In the late 1990s, teams averaged nearly 30 carries per game. Now it's closer to 25. And those carries are coming out of zone schemes and outside runs, not power and ISO. And rule changes protecting ball carries reduce the value of wearing down a defense too. You can't hit a running back low anymore, you can't launch at him when he's in a defenseless position, and the bruising back's entire identity was built on absorbing punishment and dishing it back out. When the rules neutered half of that equation, the archetype lost its appeal. And so what replaced them? The move tight end took over the fullback's role. Guys like Pat Ricard and Kyle Juszczyk are the last true fullbacks, and even they can be more of a receiving weapon than a traditional lead blocker. Teams use tight ends like George Kittle, Trey McBride, and Travis Kelce to create the same kind of movement in the run game, except they can also run routes and stretch the field vertically. The 240-pound bruising back became a 215-pound back who catches 50 passes. Derrick Henry is the last true bruiser, and even he is an outlier. Most modern backs are built for versatility. They run inside zone, outside zone, and catch passes out of the backfield. They're not trying to punish defenders anymore, they're trying to make them miss and get to the second level untouched. The modern running back is a weapon in space, not a battering ram between the tackles. The game evolved past the need for pure power. Speed, agility, and receiving skills matter more than the ability to break tackles and fall forward for extra yards. The 240-pound back didn't disappear entirely, but he's no longer the foundation of an offense. He's a luxury, not a necessity. And speaking of luxuries, we also have the 400-pound nose tackles coming up next. You used to have some really big dudes like Ted Washington, Gilbert Brown, Casey Hampton, immovable objects. Their job was simple: occupy 2 blockers, stuff the A-gap, and let the linebackers flow free to make tackles. They didn't rush the passer with finesse, and they didn't need to. They just needed to be impossible to move, and they definitely were. Washington was 375 pounds of pure mass. When he lined up over center, offensive coordinators had to account for him on every single run play. Double teams were mandatory, not optional. That freed up everyone else. Linebackers could scrape over the top and clean up. It was a simple formula: plant the big man in the middle and let chaos happen around him. But the league changed. Newer offenses pulled these giants into space, and 375 pounds becomes a massive liability when you actually need to get to the passer and have an extra DB out there chasing a slot receiver or trying to cover a running back on a wheel route. The game got faster. Offenses started using tempo and pre-snap motion to identify where the big bodies were, then attack the opposite side or force them to move laterally. When you're that heavy, lateral movement is not your strength. Rule changes didn't help either. The NFL's obsession with passing made run-stopping specialists less valuable per snap. Teams started playing nickel and dime packages as their base defense. If you can't rush the passer or drop into coverage, you're sitting. And then nose tackles couldn't do either at an elite level. They were one-dimensional in an era that demanded versatility, and so the penetrating one tech replaced them. And Aaron Donald was the gold standard. Obviously. He was 280 pounds, but he played with more explosion than most edge rushers. Instead of occupying blockers, he's disrupting them. He's shooting gaps, collapsing pockets, and creating havoc in the backfield. The modern defensive tackle doesn't just hold ground, he takes it. 300 pounds of explosion beats 375 pounds of mass in today's game. Coaches want guys who can win one-on-one matchups, not just survive double teams. The athletic profile shifted entirely. Combine numbers for defensive tackles now emphasize 10-yard splits, 3 cone drills, and short area bursts. The old school nose tackle ran a 5.9 40 and called it a day. The modern interior lineman is running a sub 5 and showing lateral agility that just would have been unthinkable 20 years ago. The shift happened gradually, but by the mid-2010s, it was pretty much complete. Teams stopped drafting 350-pound space eaters in the first round. They started targeting smaller, quicker tackles who could play multiple techniques and contribute in sub packages. The role didn't vanish entirely. You'll still see a big body on short yardage downs or goal line stands, and players like Vita Vea are still around, even though he can still rush the passer as well sometimes. But the every down nose tackle who logged 70 snaps per game, yeah, that's gone. The game evolved, and the 375-pound nose tackle couldn't evolve with it. Speed killed the Giants, and speed also killed the middle linebacker Thumpers. Levon Kirkland, London Fletcher early in his career, Dick Butkus, these linebackers were downhill missiles who lived to punish ball carriers. They read the run, filled gaps, and delivered hits that made highlight reels. On short yardage downs, they were the 8th man in the box, daring offenses to run the ball. And when offenses did, they pay for it. Kirkland was 270 pounds of controlled violence. He didn't dance around blocks, he attacked them. His job was to meet the fullback in the hole, shed the block, and bury the running back before they hit the second level. The thumper linebacker was the enforcer of the middle. He set the tone physically and made every carry up the gut a painful experience. These guys lived in an era where offenses ran the ball 40 to 45% of the time and used 2 set backs as their base personnel. The fullback would lead through the hole, the thumper would meet them head on, and the collision would echo through the stadium. It was old school football at its finest, power versus power. But the game shifted, and it kinda started with Ray Lewis. Ray slid later into the first round because of his smaller frame, and teams are worried he may not hold up as well in the league because of it, but they were obviously wrong. They also started using 3 and 4 receiver sets as their base, forcing defenses to play lighter and faster. The 250 to 60-pound thumper couldn't cover slot receivers. He couldn't match up with tight ends running seam routes, and when offenses motioned a running back into the flat, he was exposed. Suddenly, his greatest strength became his biggest weakness. Rule changes made it even worse. The NFL cracked down on defenseless receiver penalties and targeting rules. The knockout blow, the thumper's signature weapon, became a 15-yard penalty and a potential ejection. You couldn't lower your helmet and deliver the kind of hit that made running backs think twice about crossing the line of scrimmage. The league legislated the thumper's identity out of existence. The hybrid safety linebacker at 230 pounds who can run and cover became the norm. Fred Warner, Roquan Smith, Bobby Wagner, Luke Kuechly, these guys are the modern prototype. They're fast enough to cover tight ends and running backs in space. They're instinctive enough to diagnose plays and flow to the ball. And they're still physical enough to make the tackles in the run game, just without the freight train collisions that defined the previous generation. The modern linebacker plays in space more than he plays in the box. He's dropping into coverage 40 to 50% of his snaps. He's matching up with slot receivers, chasing running backs on wheel routes, and playing zone drops in the middle of the field. Speed and range matter more than mass and thump. Lateral agility and coverage skills are now the defining trait of an elite linebacker, not the ability to blow up a fullback. Teams still value physicality, but it's not the primary skill set anymore. The modern linebacker has to do everything. He's a Swiss Army knife, not a sledgehammer. The 230-pound hybrid is a generalist in an era that demands versatility. The role didn't really disappear, just evolved, and the thumper couldn't make that evolution without sacrificing the very thing that made him elite in the first place. And the same goes for the box safeties, unfortunately. Box safeties like Laurie Malloy, Roy Williams, Jamal Adams weren't traditional safeties. They were the 8th man in the box who couldn't cover, but lived to blow up tight ends and punish runners in the alley. They'd line up 7 yards from the line of scrimmage, read run, and come down like a heat-seeking missile. When a running back bounced outside, the box safety was waiting to deliver a knockout blow that sent a message to the entire offense. Roy Williams made an entire career out of this. He'd sit in the box, diagnose the play, and attack. He wasn't dropping into deep coverage or playing center field. He was a linebacker in a safety's body, specializing in run support and short area violence. Teams built their run defense around having that extra enforcer near the line of scrimmage. He'd force ball carriers to cut back inside, right into the waiting arms of linebackers who were flowing to the ball. On the other side of the ball were the enforcer receivers. Hines Ward, Anquan Bolden, these guys made crackback blocks and physicality their calling card. Ward would run a shallow cross, the defense would bite on the route, and then he'd peel back and absolutely demolish an unsuspecting linebacker or safety. It wasn't just blocking, it was a statement. Receivers took pride in their ability to punish defenders, not just catch passes. Anquan Bolden was built like a linebacker at 6'1", 220 pounds. He'd catch a slant, absorb contact from a cornerback, and then run through 2 more defenders before going down. but his blocking was just as valuable. On outside runs, he'd crack down on safeties with the kind of violence that made defensive coordinators call his number in film sessions as an example of what not to let happen. Rule changes killed both archetypes. Defensive receiver rules made it illegal to hit receivers in vulnerable positions, which eliminated the box safety's biggest weapon. Crackback block penalties neutered the enforcer receiver's identity. You can't blindside a defender anymore, you can't launch at someone who doesn't see you coming. The NFL legislated the physicality out of these roles, and once that happened, the archetypes really couldn't survive. Targeting rules made it worse. A box safety who built his career on the knockout blows suddenly had to pull up and wrap up instead of deliver contact. That split-second hesitation was enough to turn a big hit into a missed tackle. And when you're playing in nickel and dime packages 70% of the time, a safety who can't cover is a liability you can't afford. The box safety became pretty much obsolete when offenses started using 3 and 4 receiver sets as their base. You can't play an 8th man in the box when there's no box to defend. Defenses had to get lighter and faster to match the speed, which made the box safety have to evolve or disappear, and most disappeared. The big nickel safety who can cover and hit, Derwin James, Kyle Hamilton, these guys are the modern prototype. They're versatile enough to play in the box, drop into coverage, or match up with tight ends and slot receivers. They can still deliver contact, but it's within the rules. Mostly. They're enforcers with coverage skills, not just enforcers. Receivers had to evolve too. Blocking is now optional, not required. Modern receivers run routes first and block second. The enforcer mentality still exists in guys like Puka Nacua and Amon-Ra St. Brown, but it's a bonus skill, not the foundation of their game. The league moved on from the idea that receivers should be willing blockers. Now they're expected to be route runners who can separate and create after the catch. We gotta show love to the special team players like Coffin corner punters and straight toe kickers. Ray Guy, Sean Landetta, these punters were directional artists who pinned offenses inside the 10-yard line with surgical precision. The Coffin corner punt was a weapon. You'd watch the ball sail towards the sideline, spinning perfectly and land at the 3-yard line before dying out of bounds. No return, no chance to flip field position. Just perfect execution that forced offenses to drive 97 yards if they wanted points. Guy made the Pro Football Hall of Fame as a punter, which tells you pretty much everything you need to know about how valuable his skill set was. He could drop a punt inside the 20 with consistency that modern punters really can't match. It wasn't about distance, it was about the placement. Coaches trusted him to pin opponents deep, and he delivered. The Coffin corner punt was an art form that required touch, timing, and an understanding of ball flight that took years to master. The game changed. Hang time and touchback avoidance became more valuable than precision placement. Modern punters are bombing 50-yarders into the end zone, relying on coverage teams to prevent returns rather than trying to place the ball perfectly. A Coffin corner punt that goes wrong can result in a touchback or a big return. A 50-yard punt with good hang time is safer and more consistent. Teams stopped valuing the directional punter. They wanted power over placement. The numbers back it up. Punts inside the 20 used to be the gold standard metric. Now it's net punting average and touchback percentage. You can't coach a power punter to suddenly become a precision artist, and teams decided they'd rather have the power. But that change is starting to shift back with the knuckleball punch strategy. Then, there are the toe kickers. Tom Dempsey, Mark Mosley, these guys kick straight on, planting their non-kicking foot and swinging their leg like a pendulum. Dempsey set the NFL record for longest field goal at 63 yards using this technique. Mark Mosley won MVP in 1982 as a kicker, the last time that's ever happened. The straight-on approach worked for decades, but soccer-style kicking proved more accurate and powerful. The biomechanics are just better. Approaching the ball at an angle generates more force and allows for better ball control. By the mid-1980s, every kicker in the league had switched to soccer style. The toe kicker went extinct not because it didn't work, but because something better came along. No one kicks straight on anymore, it's a relic. Drop kickers are even more extinct. Doug Flutie's 06 extra point was a novelty, a throwback to an era when drop kicks were more common. The technique requires dropping the ball and kicking the moment it touches the ground, which is incredibly difficult to do and execute consistently. Rule changes move extra points back to the 15-yard line, making them actual field goal attempts rather than automatic points. That killed any remaining incentive to practice drop kicks. The modern kicker is a 50-plus yard weapon. Justin Tucker for a long time, Cam Little now. These guys are launching bombs from distances that would be unthinkable 30 years ago. Punters are directional bombers who prioritize distance and hang time over artistry. The game doesn't really reward precision as much anymore. It rewards results, power over placement, consistency over creativity. Lastly, we have the ones that hurt the most, and that's statue quarterbacks. Most of our lives, quarterbacks were pocket statues. Montana, Marino, Breeze, Brady, Peyton Manning. These quarterbacks were pure pocket passers with concrete feet. Their job was simple: stand in the pocket, read the defense, and deliver dimes from a clean pocket. They didn't scramble, they didn't roll out, they didn't need to. Give them 3 seconds in a clear throwing lane and they dissect your defense with surgical precision. Marino never ran. His release was so quick and his arm so strong that he could beat any coverage from the pocket. Brady was a statue in the truest sense. He'd take a 7-step drop, plant his feet, and fire down the field without ever thinking about escaping. Manning made a Hall of Fame career out of reading defenses pre-snap and getting the ball out before the rush even arrived. Mobility wasn't a part of the equation. The statue quarterback thrived in an era where offensive lines could hold blocks longer and defenses rushed the passer with more predictable schemes. You knew where the pressure was coming from, you knew how much time you had. The quarterback's job was to process information and deliver accurate throws, not to extend plays with his legs. It was a cerebral position that rewarded intelligence and arm talent over athleticism. But that game changed. Pass rush evolution made mobility a death sentence. Defenses learned to generate pressure without blitzing, using 4-man rushes with stunts, twists, and speed to power moves that collapsed pockets faster than ever before. Offensive line play declined as the league prioritized athleticism over size, which meant quarterbacks had less time to operate. When the pocket collapsed, the statue QB had nowhere to go. Edge rushers got faster and more athletic. Guys like Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons can beat offensive tackles with pure speed, forcing quarterbacks to escape the pocket or take a sack. The statue QB just couldn't escape. He'd stand there waiting for a receiver to come open and get destroyed. The hits piled up, the injuries mounted, and teams realized they needed quarterbacks who could extend plays when protection broke down. Rule changes protecting quarterbacks ironically made mobility more valuable. You can't hit them low anymore, you can't land on them with your full body weight, and you can't hit them in the head or neck area. So defenses adapted by chasing them instead. You can't punish a quarterback in the pocket, make them leave the pocket, and then contain them. That strategy only works if the quarterback is mobile enough to be a threat outside the pocket. The modern evolution is the dual threat quarterback and the pocket mover. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, these guys can beat you with their arms or their legs. They can extend plays when protection breaks down, creating off-schedule opportunities that defenses can't scheme for. Even traditional pocket passers like Joe Burrow are pocket movers now. They slide, roll out, and escape pressure with enough mobility to keep plays alive. Mobility is now a baseline requirement, not a luxury. Even if you're not running design quarterback runs, you need to be able to move the pocket, reset your feet, and throw on the run. The statue quarterbacks typically couldn't do any of that. He's a sitting target in an era where defenses are built to hunt quarterbacks who can't move. The shift happened gradually over the 2010s, but by the 2020s, it was complete. Teams stopped drafting immobile quarterbacks in the first round, barring Mac Jones. Even guys with elite arm talent and high football IQ fell down draft boards if they couldn't move. The league decided that mobility was non-negotiable, and the statue quarterback became extinct. So there you have it, the NFL archetypes that went extinct. Did I miss anybody obvious? Let me know below and subscribe if you're new. Thanks for watching.